Rojava is an area in northern Syria. Predominantly Kurdish, the area has broken away from Bashar Alasads Syrian government and has undertaken a revolution and democratic experiment. They've gained some mainstream media attention for being one of the only effective forces combating ISIS. However, analysis rarely goes that deep, so many people will think they're just another faction in the fractured Syrian conflict. Let's take a closer look in this video. The modern history of Rojava can be traced back to the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, after which the European powers moved into the area, especially France, which had control of Syria. The colonial governments and brutal dictators who were backed by the West dominated the Middle Eastern region. After World War II, the bankrupted European colonials withdrew from the Middle East, leaving behind a wave of Arab nationalism which grew in influence after the Arabs defeated at the hands of the newly formed State of Israel. Coups in the Arab nations were to follow, and anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist nationalist leaders would rise. However, they in turn would be replaced, after stepping on the toes of Western business interests in the oil sector and others, by increasingly authoritarian, repressive regimes who are often susceptible to influence of the old colonial powers and the USA. The redrawing of the borders by the colonialists and authoritarian regimes led to the Kurds being split between Turkey, Iraq, Iran and Syria. Ethnic repression would follow, leading to Kurdish resistance and their desire for an independent Kurdish state, which led to further, often violent repression. Kurdish organisations would ping-pong between Soviet and US support during the Cold War and after, leading to the support of the US invasion of Iraq. After the Iraq War, they allowed the Kurds to set up a somewhat autonomous region in northern Iraq, while religious and proxy warfare, which was enabled by the West's support for such fundamentalist forces during the Cold War, consumed the rest of the Middle East. It threw Syria into a civil war in which the northeast Kurdish region was mostly left to fend for itself, caught between Islamist extremist Syrian government forces and the Turkish army, as well as the KRG of northern Iraq. This power vacuum allowed a coalition of left-wing groups to come together in Rojava under the Movement for Democratic Society, or TEVDEM, which is defended by the YPG militias and proceeded to implement a progressive administration based on the PKK head Abdullah Öcalan's theories of democratic confederalism. Turkey would blockade Rojava and allow ISIS Islamists to travel through its borders to attack the fledgling society, while its troops watch from vantage points across the border. Due to its status as NATO's second largest army in a strategically important position, Turkey's ambition to install an Islamist state it could control in Syria while further repressing the Kurds could have come to pass with no reporting from mainstream media outlets. However, the effective resistance to ISIS by the YPG and YPJ militias was focused on by the media outlets, who found the women's militias of the YPJ especially fascinating. The YPG and YPJ militias were resisting Islamist forces, saving civilian populations from all ethnic and religious backgrounds, but the media did little to shed light on why they were so effective, where other groups supported by the West were not. The ideology of the PKK gave them the inspiration to fight and die for a more equal society in a region dominated by hatred and repression. The PKK used direct democracy and the autonomy it provides to prevent one sector of society from repressing another. This includes the domination of those with the means of production. It encourages cooperative organisation along with democratic control of commercial resources. Women have an equal standing in the society alongside men and must not be second-class citizens as they have commonly been reduced to by the dominant ideologies of the region. They allow freedom of religion and culture, and dogma from religious establishments is not tolerated. It also recognises we live in a finite world and must consider the environment in decision-making. Despite the opposition from ISIS, the Free Syrian Army, Turkey, Assad al-Nusra, and the nationalist Northern Iraqi Kurdish administration of the KRG, the autonomous cantons of Rojava have pursued a policy of democratic and federal Syria, with rights for all ethnic and religious minorities, avoiding new conflicts and protecting human rights, creating a relatively stable and peaceful society in the cantons of Rojava, at least until further assaults by its many opponents. This has allowed local councils, self-defense committees, Kurdish language schools, and the equal distribution of bread and fuel, women's participation in society, community police, freedom of religion and no religion, as well as courts to be established. Women have been able to assemble and teach each other about their rights as equal citizens. It encourages them to take their place in society alongside and equal to the men. They fight for Rojava in the YPJ militias, and women's groups have made sure that the p.y.d sees women's issues as a high priority, leading to the aim of gender balance in functions of the society. This is slowly breaking down the repression of thousands of years of religiously justified repression of women in the region. By not allowing religious dogma to infect Rojava, previously unconvinced communities, such as the Christians and other Muslim denominations, have joined the democratic system in Rojava. Implementing a cooperative democratic system has shown all people that they can coexist in peace together, where they face repression in much of the surrounding country. However, these repressive forces remain a great threat to Rojava and its autonomous democracy. To try and ensure this cooperation continues, the p.y.d has said it will implement a constitution known as the social contract, created with different members of ethnic and belief groups. This commits to a democratic self-government, open to all and only using military forces for defence, with a recognition that the revolution will take time to build and defend. The revolution should build from the bottom of society, while accepting open forums compatible with pluralism and democracy, not accepting state nationalism or forms of centralised management and rule. A separation of church and state was also a commitment, and a recognition of children and women's rights. All languages would be recognised, and prisons are to be places of dignity, rehabilitation and reform. Rights of refugees are also recognised. This commitment has led to the refusal to join outside-backed political bodies that aim to represent a government outside Syria, as they are made up predominantly of old vested power structures, who are unlikely to offer a solution that can be sustainable for life in the region, as the experiment in Rojava is proving it could be. The new system in Rojava has seen the set-up of village or street communes made up of neighbourhoods of around 300 people, which localise decision-making and help people realise they can rule themselves. They have the power to decide on electricity and food administration and discuss as well as implement solutions to social issues. They support the poor with food and fuel. Communal cooperatives have been set up, and commissions for organising defence, justice, infrastructure, ecology, youth and economy. They meet every week and gather opinions and find out issues affecting the local population, and report back in the next week's meeting where solutions and ongoing activities can be reviewed and discussed. The communes pass their orders upwards to councils and then up to the canton level. Local committees deal with legal questions and disputes apart from severe crimes such as murder. They aim to achieve a consensus between the two parties. 5 to 9 members of the commune are elected to the committees based on their ability to reach a consensus between two parties. Women-only committees deal with cases such as domestic abuse, forced marriage and multiple marriages. If consensus cannot be reached at a local level, then the case is sent up to the higher institutions at the city, regional and canton level. Other committees exist and have a role in decision making. These include health and women's committees. These committees exist at all levels to keep a link with local decisions all the way up the chain. The communes then send delegates to a larger council that represents 7 to 10 villages or a city district. These councils are not only made up of the commune representatives but also all political parties and various organisations, with a quota to be made up of at least 45% women. Chair positions are held jointly between a man and a woman, and decisions must be made by consensus. The local population decides on the candidates and elects them. A democratic self-administration, or DSA, has been set up in the cantons, or counties of Rojava. These include Syria, Kobani and Afrin. The DSA implements the decisions made by the TAV-DEM committee and also runs some administration work in local authorities, municipalities, education and judiciary systems, among others. The DSA is made up of men and women as well as different backgrounds, nationalities and ethnicities. At the moment, the 3 cantons are administered separately with the goal of unifying the 3 under a democratic confederal model. Opposition parties are free to exist within Rojava, however, to prevent violent infighting, they may not establish their own militias. All militias they form must be under the ultimate control of the YPG or YPJ. The main threat internally is the KDP-backed nationalist Kurdish movement, the KRG being in control of northern Iraq, who have a nationalist capitalist ideology and have built a trench along the border in Rojava to implement a blockade. This has resulted in shortages of essential supplies, and sources have said they believe this is allowed to happen as the revolution has shown that people can rule themselves and not need the support of the West and its global financial interests. However, due to these external challenges and the ongoing war in Syria, it has been estimated that around 70% of Rojava's resources go towards the war effort. But basic needs of the population are still being met. This has led to a policy of economic self-sufficiency, with cooperatives being set up in all sectors to achieve this goal, while making sure any development takes the environment into account to make progress sustainable. They have established a newspaper and television station. New factories and refineries have been set up, with some being restricted due to their effect on the environment. Workers have formed unions in most sectors. The population has risen given the relative peace and inclusiveness of the system in Rojava. People say the job market is healthy, with jobs available to all. Charging on interest on loans has been made illegal along with financial capital. Taxation is planned to take place transparently, and with monies being collected distributed to ministries depending on their need. A hospital has been established, paid for by those with the means to pay for it, but free to use for all. Schools have been set up in every village, providing free education for all. Prices for goods are kept low, and all of this is going towards setting up an economy built on communes and cooperatives. The schools operate in an alternative education model. This has resulted in a collaborative form of learning, with students teaching and learning from one another in intellectual matters, while being taught useful and practical information from their teachers. Students are encouraged to think for themselves and empowered so they may contribute to the community. Students also have youth councils where they can decide on projects and the building and modification of recreational sites. Policing is provided by the Assish. The police bureaus are decentralised and the responsibility of each canton. Members are from all backgrounds and paid a monthly salary. Assayishes are elected directly by the community. The Assish leadership is then decided by further elections. The goal is to provide most citizens with police training so that the community takes responsibility for its own security instead of relying on permanent employees. So, Rojava offers a genuine alternative to the repressive systems around them. This is especially incredible given the location of Rojava, surrounded by corrupt authoritarian fundamentalist and nationalist regimes, and is therefore a beacon of hope in the darkness that is worth our support and bringing to the attention of others. However, support should never be unconditional. We must criticise the project when we feel it's gone astray. Being non-critical and giving blind support helps no one. But we must remember that the circumstances of the revolution in Rojava, a poor war-torn area, which is kept so by decades of repressive regimes. So we must support this extraordinary revolution, but never be afraid to criticise it, always remembering that nothing in practice, and especially in this area of the world, will be perfect first time. We can also take lessons and inspirations from this. Balkan's democratic confederalism and the attempted implementation in Rojava is providing us with an up-to-date example of how real direct democratic societies can be organised, developed and made successful in the real world in some of the most challenging conditions. How long this can last, though, is a worry. With the Turks now invading and the President of Turkey recently taking so much personal power after the last election, he's like a new sultan bent on destroying Rojava and dominating Syria for his own ends. I believe Rojava deserves our solidarity. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of the Rojava revolution in the comments.